that tracks along the Cosumnes River. So pretty impressive benefits, and also improving the habitat for sandhill cranes. Next slide. So this is a graphic that kind of just illustrates some of the measures that we're going to be implementing. I mentioned that you have the groundwater elevation benefit from the in-lieu recharge, but we're also going to be doing some activities and incentives working with landowners to help enhance those riparian, vernal pool, and wetland habitats. Part of that will be working with landowners on their grazing management, installing fences to try and control where the cattle are going. You're seeing that we're going to be planting crops using those recycled water, and again, the riparian and wetland protection with those different types of controls in place, and also establishing new plantings along the riparian corridor, again, to help enhance those forests and be able to keep them going for perpetuity, we hope. So next slide, please. And again, this is just kind of an illustration. As we're working with landowners, we'll be looking to see what we can do with those landowners for winter wheat to be able to help have foraging for sandhill cranes. You'll have post-harvest field management for foraging, again, working with the landowners on different techniques that they can do within their farming practices, using recycled water to help for that forage and the roost habitat. And then earthen field borders to create kind of that wintertime application or ponding to help provide, again, opportunities for sandhill cranes. So this really is working with a lot of different entities, not only the farmers, but there's also conservancies that own land in that area. And a lot of the landowners also want to be able to have that, dual role of providing crops, but as well as providing that environmental benefit. Next slide. So we have been working on this project for quite some time, and I can't stress enough the value of having multiple partners and stakeholders. We worked very closely with a lot of different organizations to design the program, to get their support, to really understand where things, what they would like to see as a benefit. And as you can see, we had a broad consortium of supporters, from the Nature Conservancy to the Sierra Club, to our local Creeks Council, Ducks Unlimited, the Environmental Defense Fund. The Sacramento County Farm Bureau has been just a stellar advocate and a partner, because obviously we're working with their membership to ensure farming and agricultural communities can still continue and thrive. So had we not had the support of the program, I don't think we would be where we're at today. So it really took a lot of time to build those relationships and mentor those relationships and keep them going. And in fact, as we were going through the water storage investment program process, both for the hearings, and then there were multiple hearings and multiple appeal hearings, we had our partners by our side. I believe we were the only program, we had no opposition to the project. And many of them showed up in full at our hearings, supporting the program, and Environmental Defense Fund and Nature Conservancy were actually part of our presentation. So it really was an opportunity to really show that partnership and how collaboration can really help move projects forward. Next slide. So kind of giving an update on the program status. You can move to the next slide. So where we're at, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the ins and outs of the water storage investment program. That's almost its own presentation in itself, getting through that. But from the standpoint of where we're at in this process, we are quite a bit, I think, ahead of many of the projects, because we had already done a lot of work. We had a completed final feasibility study that was done in 2019. So that feasibility study was with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, and they had, so that had gone through that process and it was approved. We also have secured our water rights. That was a huge milestone to achieve that, and that was done in late 2019 as well. Where our CEQA is 90% complete. In fact, when we submitted our water storage investment program application, we had already a certified programmatic EIR, And so we were well ahead of the game on that aspect. And now we're doing 4 different addendums that are focusing on some of the more project-specific elements of CEQA. And that should be completed. Actually, the last item goes to our board in July, and then we will be 100% complete with CEQA. The next stage with the Water Commission will be a feasibility hearing, and that will occur. We're looking at, if you could go back one more time, maybe I wasn't quite ready yet. Thank you. So we'll be doing that. Probably we're looking at the fall of 2021. And that will be an opportunity for the commission to determine the feasibility of the project and if there's any outstanding issues. And so all of the WISA projects are going to have to go through this process. We are also working hard to achieve our environmental permitting. So that's with our, 404 certs and working with the Army Corps. And so that is underway right now. So we're way ahead of schedule on those as well. Part of the WISIP program requires us to enter into contracts also with the different agencies. So we've said these are the benefits that we expect from the project. So we will be working with the Department of Fish and Wildlife as well as the State Water Board, entering into agreements on how that compliance will be demonstrated. And not until we get those projects or the contracts and agreements with DFW and the State Water Board, once those are completed, then we actually get to go back to the Water Commission for a funding hearing. So one thing about this process is there's a lot of money up front and a lot of time up front having to get these projects to the position to where you actually will finally start getting reimbursements. And that's going to be some time out. We are hoping to get our agreements in 2022 and be able to go to the commission for the actual funding agreement so we can begin getting reimbursed. Another critical timeline with the WISIP is that in January of 2022, all of the projects have to have a draft environmental documents done. So they have to have their draft CEQA completed and also the feasibility study finding. So everybody's going to be under that time crunch to meet those milestones. But we are in good shape since we will have our CEQA already completed and we have our feasibility study completed.
Hey, Terry. We had
next slide, please. Oh, yes.
Terry, we had one question came in from the chat from Harold Mantle, and Harold was asking. Sorry about the echo. Harold was asking where would the salinity load go if not to the delta. And so Harold, the nitrate in the recycled water will go directly to the crops and will be used beneficially. There will be some nitrate remaining after the biological nutrient removal. The balance of the salts, chlorides, sodium, et cetera, will just go to the soil profile. We have a relatively modest salinity level in the recycled water, about 500 milligrams per liter. So it's a good level for crop irrigation. There's no chloride or sodium toxicity to any of the crops that are grown in the area. So mainly the salt primarily then will be in the soil profile. And then Anne asks a question regarding dilution, I believe, in the river downstream, and I think related to that, it's what happens is by cutting the discharge by 95 tons a day, that salinity down in the delta improves by a couple of salinity points from the 750 micromos down to 748 or something in that range. So it's a small but an impact across the South Delta.
Thanks, Dave. So another key milestone that we just achieved as well is our LAFCO annexation process. We received approval. One of the elements is we had to extend our service area for the delivery of recycled water. So currently this area is outside Regional SAM's service area. So we had to go to LAFCO, have that annexed. And again, it was focused not for providing wastewater treatment or any other services. It was specific for recycled water and delivering that for agricultural and environmental enhancements. So we were pleased to get that process completed. That's always an interesting process. It was a first time for many of us, and there was a few twists and turns, but we did get it through the process and have that successfully achieved, which is a nice thing to have behind us now that we have that LAFCO annexation. Next slide. So as I mentioned, key to this project is getting landowners interested to take our water. So obviously over the last couple years, we have been doing extensive outreach with landowners in the area to understand, will they commit to using that recycled water? What does that entail? And so what we've done is we started with what we're calling as letters of intent, which we sent out to all of the different landowners, had them quantify the amount of water that they currently use, that they're pumping with groundwater, what their crop types are, and then gauging their interest to participate in the program. And so we have done a tremendous job, even with COVID. We've had a great team out there talking with folks on the phone, field visits when we can, where there were safe distances, but we have just met 80% of our goal for irrigation demand of almost 32,000 acre feet. So very, very pleased. And as you can see in this graphic, the green is a positive yes and maybe that they want to participate in the program. And I think what we're seeing with that outreach is, as we've been working with a core group of landowners, they start seeing their peers and colleagues joining the program. And I think that's also helped with the interest to have folks be ready, because it really does help them in the long run with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act coming online. Groundwater is going to be regulated. There's that uncertainty for the landowners, and this really provides an alternative source of water for them to help them secure their crops and be able to continue moving forward. So really excited about the overwhelming response and interest from our landowners. Next slide. The other component is our ecoplan. So as I mentioned earlier, we have the agricultural irrigation, and we'll be entering into agreements with those landowners. But we also have this ecoplan component of the project with around 17,000 acre feet that we're looking to have landowners provide an interest. Do they want to participate in that ecoplan? Are there opportunities that we can work with them on their land, again, with fencing, grazing habits, wintertime application of water, and initial survey with 9 responses, and that's over 80% of the ecoplan acreage. We've had, sorry, I had that confused there. We have had an interest of over 81% to meet that goal of delivering the ecoplan. So we've got, our target is 4,800 acres. Out of those 9 responses we received, those are from some of the larger landowners, obviously, that, we've got 3,987 with an interest for providing that eco target. So the total acreage. Probably didn't explain that too well. That one I jumbled up a little bit. Next slide. So Dave mentioned this early on as well, and that is the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. That is going to be a key driver with our landowners as they see what's coming down the line with the groundwater sustainability agencies and the groundwater sustainability plans, the GSPs. So this particular project, Harvest Water, is located in the South American subbasin. And there are several GSAs that have agreed to work together to develop a single GSP. This particular project really provides tremendous benefits, as you've seen some of the graphics that I've shown, where those groundwater elevations are going to be increasing and minimizing those cones of depression. So this project is helping the GSAs by being a managed action, a project management action that's going to be implemented as part of that GSP. So we've been working very close with the different agencies that are comprised of that, with that GSP, and seeing how we can move this project forward to help them achieve those benefits. And then what will be as critical with this, within the GSPs and the GSAs, is how that groundwater is going to be accounted for as well. So we need to ensure that those elevations increase, hit those targets, but also have the ability, when we've reached that sustainable yield and sustainable goal, how are we going to be utilizing that groundwater for conjunctive use? So a lot of effort's going to be going forward in this as some of those details start getting worked into, and we deal with the groundwater accounting element side of this. So, but I think we've been, the program's obviously being received well because we're helping them achieve compliance with SGMA. Next slide. So we have two programs that are kind of moving harvest water forward. I'm over the Administrative Program Management Office, which is dealing with all the permitting, all the agreements with the landowners, negotiations with DFW, State Water Board and the Water Commission, and establishing, recycled water utility. How is this program going to be implemented? And then we have the Capital Program Management Office, which is dealing with the construction elements of the project. And so we are moving forward pretty quickly here with this project to meet our milestones of being able to deliver water in 2024. So the CPMO office has been moving very aggressively. They've brought in a joint venture team to help with the program management. That's with Carollo and Brown and Caldwell. And so we've already are starting to move forward on the pump station designs and pipeline designs. This particular graphic illustrates the pump station and pipeline transmission lines that we're envisioning, and the sizes of those pipes. So obviously the 66-inch pipe is highlighted in red, coming from our treatment plant through the city of Elk Grove, and then down as you're starting to hit the agricultural lands. So that's going to be an extensive pipe, obviously going through an urban area, trying to minimize those impacts the best we can. Then we have another 10 miles of 16 to 66-inch lines that will kind of be that second transmission line, and then breaking down into some of the distribution lines in the west and the central south. So those are all going to be broken out into those phases. And as I mentioned, we've already, RFP has already gone out on the pump station. I believe we selected a contractor, and then we're looking at the RFPs going out on these other transmission pipelines to start moving the project forward. And Dave, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add on that aspect, or?
Just to say that several of our partner firms in the East Bay Leadership Council and the task force have been are involved. In addition to Brown Caldwell, Carollo leading with the CPMO management, we have HDR has been selected for the harvest water pump station to do that design, Stantec to design the Elk Grove transmission and Franklin Essinger distribution pipelines, and then the RFP is out right now for number 4 and 5. So that's going to be a big project as well, as you can see. And then finally, we'll have an RFP out later this year for the on-farm connections. Approximately 75 different landowners will be working with us to use this water. So we'll have connections at each major parcel.
Great. Thanks, Dave. Next slide, please. So this is just highlighting the harvest water pump station. We're looking at 7 pumps, 105 MGD, and as we just mentioned, the design is moving forward, having that done by September 2022, and then construction will start in 2023 through October 2024. And next slide. So our program schedule, this is kind of a high level schedule, but we have our environmental documents and permitting that we're looking to wrap up in Q3 of this year. We're working on our water quality permitting strategy and hoping to have that wrapped up by the end of 2022. And those are our permits working with the Regional Water Board and State Water Board on how we're going to be on the agricultural irrigation, probably falling under the recycled water general order. And then also looking at some creative strategies on the wintertime application, working with our Regional Water Quality Control Board to see how we can work through that process. And a lot of that will be working with, there's an irrigated lands program that the Regional Board administers for the Central Valley. And we're looking at that aspect of trying to see if we can streamline the permitting process. And one of our fundamental goals and is what we've promised our landowners is we do not want to add additional burden onto them for their regulatory compliance. So how can we work with them and the regional board to minimize those impacts? and our regional board has been very supportive. So we're having those ongoing discussions. Utility governance and contracting, we are going to be working on that through 2023. And that's with the kind of the governance structure. LAFCO annexation's been completed, but also entering into agreements with all of those landowners, with the 75 to 90 landowners that we're going to be entering into agreements. So again, we're going to try and streamline that contracting process. We don't want to have 75 to 90 individual permits. So we're hoping we can have, 5 or 6 broad templates and be able to move those forward. And I mentioned our water storage investment program and state agency contracting. We're hoping to have that wrapped up in second quarter of 2022, so we can have those agreements in place with Fish and Wildlife and the State Water Board, and finally get to go to the commission to be able to start getting some of that money flowing back into our coffers. So, and as I mentioned, the Harvest Water Pump Station, we're looking at the design in 2022, construction 23, 24. And then the transmission pipelines, again, as those are coming online at different time periods, and ultimately begin recycled water deliveries by 2024. And then that'll continue on as we get those other pipeline segments constructed and ready to go. Next slide. Oh, please, yes.
We just had one question from Harold Mantle about pipeline materials. And Harold was wondering what kind of materials we're considering. Harold, we are looking at steel as the primary material for the large diameter pipelines from 66-inch down to about 36-inch diameter. From the 36 downward, we'll be looking at PVC. And then for all of our trenchless crossings, directional drilling with the, as you suggested, HDPE, high density polyethylene pipe is will be one of the primary materials for those directional drills under creeks, railroads, and other features, highway features that we have to cross under.
Great. Thank you, Dave. So this, with respect to the WISP monetized benefits, as I mentioned, we had to quantify and monetize those benefits that we believe the project will be providing. And how those were monetized are illustrated in this table. So for each of those public benefits, the riparian was 21.7 million, wetlands was worth 73, fall run Chinook salmon 79. And so from a total, as you look at those different elements, we've got 246.3 million in ecosystem benefits. And then the State Water Board quantified the water quality benefit at 47.7 million. So that is the funding that we have to date. One of the challenges that I think all of us are facing within the WISP program is that when we quantified and monetized these benefits, it was required by the commission to value those in 2015 dollars. So here we are 6 years later, and with inflation, we're seeing some pretty big hits on those costs, and looking at how are we going to be dealing with those to try and make up that those inflation dollars. So again, we've been having discussions with the Water Commission, with a group of all of the WISP applicants, trying to see how can we address this. And next slide, I think, is going to be probably getting to our budget. So we're looking at 257 million for the infrastructure construction. The ECO program is 76.7 million. We've got other program costs and the construction contingencies at 86 and 24 million. So our budget's coming in around 444 million. So we've had an increase in costs as well as inflation. So looking at seeing how we're going to try and rectify that is our challenges coming ahead, and seeing if there's some other more additional funding opportunities. Next slide. So from a funding standpoint, we've received 287.5 million from WISP. We've also secured a 4.2 million wind grant from the Bureau of Reclamation, and they are soliciting another round that we've submitted an application. So hopefully we'll be able to get a little bit more funding from on the federal side. But currently we're at 291.7 million that we have funded from outside sources. So we have a funding gap of around 152 million. We're looking at other grant sources, and we'll be looking at regional sand ratepayers as well because they benefit from this program. So we're looking at trying to fund out with the remaining funds from our ratepayers. Next slide. So as we're moving forward, we've got a lot of things all going in parallel. So it's quite a challenge. So obviously we're continuing to work with our landowners, getting those recycled water agreements in place, securing the benefit agreements with DFW and Water Board and the Commission, continuing on our permitting strategy, and moving forward with our capital projects and initiating those design efforts. The next slide. I think that's it. There's a lot to talk about, so I'll leave it there, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. And Dave's here as well, which is great. So if I can't answer anything, I know he will be able to jump in. And if not, we will get the answers for you. So Gary, it looks like you have a question, Gary. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Terry and Dave, for a great presentation. I've got actually three different questions for you, and first of all, just focusing on drinking water, and in terms of the Orange County Water District and their use of the groundwater basin, and the purpose is related to drinking water. They take their water all the way to tertiary level of treatment, and I didn't catch how far you guys treat yours, and I'm assuming in that groundwater, in that basin there, that there are people drinking that. And so how have you handled the drinking water aspect of this project? So that's the first question. And then Dave, I know you addressed the salt in the soil profile, but 95 tons a year seems like a lot of salt to me. And doesn't that become a problem somewhere in the future? And then finally, I worked on the Freeport project, and the amount of water that was taken out of that was very challenging in terms of delta outflows, and resulted in a lawsuit. And I just wondered if, this is 50,000 acre feet of water that's not going through the delta, as I understand it. And that seems like a lot to me. So anyhow, sorry about three parts, but I thought I'd just throw it all out there.
Great, thanks. On the drinking water aspects, and Dave, you can jump in as well. For the agricultural irrigation, it's done at agronomic rates. So it's not really going to be affecting the groundwater quality. The wintertime application will have some incidental recharge, but it's going to be, I think, a minimum amount, because most of it will be there for habitat restoration and enhancement, like for the Pacific Flyway, similar to what the rice fields do as they're flooding their fields. But we'll have to ensure that there's not an impact on that groundwater. But the bulk of it, again, is from that in lieu recharge. So it's not a direct recharge. I believe Orange County probably is doing RO on their facilities. But I may be mistaken, so it's not a direct injection, it's not direct recharge. So that's one thing that we've had to clarify with folks, because they'll hear that in lieu recharge, but really, again, that 50,000 acre feet, 32.5 is going to be at agronomic rates, and then the 17,000 is going to be during short windows, and will be a minimal amount, but definitely we'll have to demonstrate that we're complying with any issues. Anything you want to add on that one, Dave?
No, that covers it. Gary, we did plan for the possibility of a managed recharge basin, but that would require us to, if we implemented that component, we would need to have dilution water and those kind of considerations to comply with state DDW regs. So we're holding off on any direct recharge and just doing the in lieu and the incidental recharge.
But you guys showed that the groundwater basin increases by a significant amount in the first 10 years, right? And so that is a recharge, I think, isn't it? And wouldn't people be drinking that, or?
Well, it's so that in lieu recharge is, instead of them pumping that groundwater, they're using our recycled water. So you almost have a 1-to-1 increase just from them not pumping that groundwater.
Okay.
and then Gary, because of the fact that we're just applying the water spread out over the 26,000 acres of land in the delivery area, we have the application rates are such that the water is going through the soil profile. We're getting soil lock for treatment on any recycled water that's going through the soil and eventually making its way into the groundwater. So we do have a number of agricultural residential wells in the area. So yeah, we have to be very careful not to, to have the proper setbacks away from those wells where we're irrigating, and all those best practices that the regional and state board will require.
Thanks, Dave. On the salt. Yeah, on the salt loading, and Dave, you might be able to take this one better than I can, but we will be working with the regional board to ensure that we're not having any degradation. And within the Central Valley, they have a CV salts program. It's a pretty extensive program that's going to be implemented. And so we'll be working through that process with them.
Yeah, Gary, it is a lot of salt, 95 tons per day. It's not tons per year, it's tons per day. So yeah. You've got lots of salinity. It is it's right now it's going down the river and into the delta, but as far as agricultural use goes, it's a very modest levels that are going to be in soil profile and eventually leach down through and ultimately get to the groundwater basin, and then eventually will make their way down through to the eventually to the surface water. But it is a much more circuitous path than directly down the river, and so that's the nature of our benefit. And all of the nitrate, of course, will be taken up by the crops, so that will be a net consumer. But the other inorganic constituents that don't have a beneficial use on the crop will eventually make their way to the groundwater basin. And we have done the modeling to make sure that we don't have any exceedances in ambient groundwater levels such that we would have any problems.
Okay, delta outflow.
Yeah, we've first of all did the environmental analysis. We found that the project program would have an impact in multi-year droughts, like the one we're in now, or a 5-year drought, say as we experienced in the late 80s, early 90s, and that would have an effect on Shasta cold water pool storage. So we had a mitigation measure. We have a mitigation measure that we consult with the Bureau and the other agencies on cold water pool in the event that Shasta storage drops below a certain level. Something that we do, and agree to cut back irrigation in the early months. And then we went through the water rights, and we had to work with a number of protestants that protested our petition for change. And we worked out a program where during Shasta critical years, we actually do cut back our recycled water deliveries by 50% of our maximum delivery. And that's something that we'll do until we get that equilibrium that Terry described after 20 or so years, when 50% or more of the water is actually returning downstream to the delta, because we fill the basin over the first 20 years, and then we get equilibrium, and the bulk of the water we're actually irrigating is making its way back into the downstream delta. So that's our with those negotiations with the Bureau and San Luis Delta and Westlands and CDFW, we were able to come up with a water rights order that they could live with, and we would make the project and the program work.
Great, thank you very much.
Hey, Dave. This is Bob. Can you hear me?
Yep. Yes.
I congratulate Terry for a great story about lemonade. And my reference to that is that I think you said in 2010, a regulatory action caused Sac Regional to get very frustrated about regulatory actions that eventually became the driving force for this project. Cleaning up the discharge into the Sac River was very controversial. And so commend you and your leadership team for overcoming the emotional reactions of that regulatory action to where you are today. It's a great story. So congratulations to you and your team.
Thanks, Bob. It's been quite a ride for the last 10 to 15 years, but it's a nice feeling to see where we're at today and moving forward in this positive way that's going to benefit not only our region, but our agricultural interests and the environment all in one. So it looks like we had a couple other questions in the chat. One is the 2-year construction schedule typical for a project of this size. I'm going to let Dave handle that one.
Yeah, it's very aggressive. We are on a very fast track, wanting to get all of the pump station and pipeline infrastructure in place, including the on-farm connections, to be able to take advantage of the availability of the water in 2023. So we're pushing very hard on that. We think that some of the construction will trail out to 24 and into 2025, but if we can get that main pipeline and the Franklin Essinger pipelines that Stantec will be designing, if we can get those done and the connections made, we can start irrigating in the late 24 season and then start to achieve those benefits. So it will be in that sense somewhat phased, but all told it'll probably end up being more like a 3 to 4 year overall construction window. We also have the farmers lined up to install all of the equipment that's on their property, and that's what they do. They have contractors out there that do that work, and it's a much more streamlined a process and more cost efficient, and we'll pay them back through lower priced recycled water. So that will be happening in parallel with the main infrastructure. And then the question from Dan McIntyre about concern about recycled water impacts on crops. Yes, we have a lot of experience working with down in Castroville, Monterey, Pajaro, as Ben Romero was mentioning, Santa Rosa, Sonoma County, with recycled water levels at above 750, you start to see some real impacts. Luckily, fortunately, recycled water in our system is similar to the Santa Rosa, Sonoma County water, similar to Pajaro and lower salinity than down in Monterey. So we're in the 500 milligram per liter level, which is perfectly suitable for tree crops, vineyards, as well as the forage crops.
Thanks, Dave. Well, it looks like I think that's all the questions, and I definitely appreciate having the opportunity to share with you our efforts on this program.
Gary and Dan, George, Lindy, I had asked if the task force would be willing to consider, and as the task force and the East Bay Leadership Council has issued a letter of support for the Expand Los Vaqueros and the sites program. I was wondering if we as a task force would be willing to consider offering our endorsement of the Harvest Water Program, and as Terry and the organization carries this forward.
Dave, I think it's a great idea, and I know we're open to it. So it'd be great if you guys would provide a draft that we could circulate amongst our water task force, and then work with Lindy to ultimately get the approval from our full board. That's kind of the process that we do. What is your timing?
Yeah, the timing of over the next several months would be ideal. So it's not a rush. It's something that I wanted to see if the task force was open to after today's presentation, and so we can start that process and share that with the task force at the next meeting and go from there.
Yeah, as one of the co-chairs, I would endorse a letter of support by EBLC.
Me too, as the co-chair, Dan McIntyre, I support it.
Great. It sounds like we have a lot of support. So as Gary outlined, if there is already a draft you all have or something you can send to us that we can work with to kind of get that letter going, we can then forward it to kind of the planning team and leadership, and we'll move it to the board from there.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Terry.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. But in the past, we've been basically trying to figure out how does such a project create benefit to the service area Bay Leadership Council, which is Contra Costa, Alameda County. So where's the tie? And therefore, in drafting a letter, try to emphasize how our mission, or at least has been for economic vitality and quality of life. I mean, I think that it definitely deserves support. It's just what's the answer to the question about economic vitality and quality of life here in the East Bay area?
Terry, one thing to consider too might be trying to outline how this is innovation that can be followed by other entities throughout the state.
Thank you. Those comments are helpful.
And Bob, using your analogy of making lemonade, I think there was a question earlier that someone asked about, gee, what would be the conjunctive use benefit? And so one of the elements, because we're right in the neighborhood of the Freeport project, one of the elements we'll be looking at is accounting for that groundwater storage. And as Terry said, once we get to the equilibrium point 25 years down the road, but one of the potential opportunities would be to in drought years use some of the stored groundwater for recycle water irrigation on the fields, and then put some of our treated water in the river for downstream environmental and other beneficial uses. So that would be another potential connection to both environmental water account, water for the benefit of the state, as well as potential downstream partners.
And specifically, and as I'm thinking my own question, certainly we've been very supportive of anything that benefits the Delta in a holistic way. So this can be
Great.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, hi, Marguerite. I see you had a hand up.
Hi, Terry. How are you?
Good.
Sorry, I'm on two devices. I'm having computer issues today. I think it's a great idea to pursue a support letter because everything is interconnected, as folks have pointed out. And I think it is really good to acknowledge kind of what Bob was talking about, that you guys have done such an amazing job, like resolving your issues with folks as it relates to the Delta water supply, Delta water quality. And I think, I think you're just an amazing example of collaboration and cooperation. And so I think, I don't know exactly how to word that in a letter, but I mean, I think it'd be nice that you guys get acknowledged for what you're doing.
Great. Thank you. I've been taking notes to see how we can frame that up. So I appreciate all the feedback.
Yeah, and just to add, Marguerite and Contra Costa has been a great partner with Regional SAN and sites and the other WISA funded projects, and in working with each other, making sure that we're all working beneficially with the Water Commission and the other agency, resource agency staff, because it is a complex program, and getting the funding lined up is a major effort, and so it's been that collaboration's also been very, very helpful.
Hey Dave, this is Ernie. I think that's a great idea. I love the benefits. Great presentation. Absolutely, completely agree with Marguerite's statement. We'd be happy to work with you and see if we can make sure that whatever support you need from us is something I'd be happy to take back to our board as well, and share the support we can for this important project.
Thanks, Ernie.
Yeah, thank you. Wonderful. Thank you once again. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for being here, Terry, and Dave for connecting us to this wonderful presentation. It looks like we're going to be able to end a little bit early. I'm just kind of going to look to our co-chairs and make sure no one had any other announcements that they wanted to make. Harold, you're clapping, I believe, not raising your hand, right? Okay, perfect. Just wanted to make sure. So this was a great presentation. I really enjoyed it. Thank you all so much. If it's okay with Terry, I'll try to put it on our website. And the question and answer part is also available via recording. So we'll try to get that up for everyone. In the meantime, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you in July for our next presentation.